Hello, Mr. Thomaswick here again with lesson 1-8. This lesson will be over algebraic properties. Our learning target for today is I can identify and use algebraic properties. It's not a whole lot to the notes today. We're going to mainly focus on these properties in this chart that you see here. You'll notice we have two different operations that we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be focusing mainly on addition and multiplication today, and you can see those indicated in our chart up here. Addition and multiplication. The first property we're going to talk about is the commutative property. The commutative property states that it doesn't matter what order we add or multiply something in, it's going to come out to be the same. So for example, 2 plus 3 is equal to 5, and 3 plus 2 is also equal to 5. It doesn't matter which way we add it, it's going to come out to be the same answer. In general, we can state that by saying A plus B is the same thing as B plus A. We also have the same property with multiplication. 2 times 3 is equal to 6, and 3 times 2 is equal to 6. And again, we use the same form. A times B equals B times A. The next property we're going to talk about is the associative property. Notice the root word of that is associate. So associate means to group with something, or to get along with something, or to identify with something. That's going to give us a clue as to what this property is going to do. This property says that we can group objects in different ways in addition and multiplication, and we'll still get the same answer. So for example, if we have 1 plus parentheses, 2 plus 3, and parentheses, it's going to be the same thing as when we have 1 plus 2 in parentheses plus 3. And we can see that if we follow the order of operations. Order of operations, remember, G comes first for grouping. So we would do 2 plus 3, and that gives us 5. And we still have 1 plus 5, which is going to give us 6. If we do the same thing over here, following our grouping first, 1 plus 2 is going to give us 3. And we're going to have 3 plus 3 equals 6. It doesn't matter which two numbers we group together, if it's all addition, we're going to have the same answer, and that's our associative property of addition. Associative property of multiplication is very similar. We can group the multiplication together in different ways and get the same answer. So for example, the parentheses in this one tells me I would have to do 5 times 6 first, which 5 times 6 gives us 30, and 4 times 30 is 120. If we do the same thing over here, 4 times 5 gives us 20, and 20 times 6 gives us 120. So that's the associative property. Next property we're going to talk about is identity property. And basically this is when we're going to add or multiply something to get what we started with. So for addition, anytime we add 0 to something, we're going to get what we started with. That makes sense if you think about it in terms of apples. If you have 10 apples and you don't buy any more, you still have 10 apples. Alright, so A plus 0 is going to give us A, and 7 plus 0 is going to give us 7. No matter what number we take, we're going to get what number we started with. Multiplication is pretty similar. The only difference is instead of using 0 this time, we use 1. So 1 times anything is going to give us what we started with. So 8 times 1 would give us 8. If we put in general terms A, where A was any number, A times 1 equals A. Inverse property is a property we're going to use a lot this year. We're going to specifically focus on inverse when we come to solving equations in the next unit. What an inverse does is it undoes something. It gets rid of something. So for example, with our addition property, to get rid of a positive 5, you would have to add a negative 5. When you simplify this, 5 plus a negative 5 is the same thing as 5 minus 5, which is going to give us 0. This is true for any number. If you take any number, A, and add its opposite or its negative, you will result in 0. That's because addition and subtraction are inverse operations. With multiplication, if you take a number and multiply it by a fraction form of it, where you write the reciprocal 1 over 6, for example in this problem, you are going to end up with 1. Because if you were multiplying these fractions, 6 is really 6 over 1. When you multiply fractions, you multiply the top times the top, so 6 times 1 would give us 6, and multiply the bottom. 1 times 6 would give us 6. And we know that 6 goes into both 6 and 6, which reduces to 1. The same thing holds for our general form, a. If we have a over 1 times 1 over a, our a's will cancel out, and we'll be left with 1. Now, just to go over another situation, let's say, for example, that you're starting with a fraction. Let's say maybe 2/3, and you're asked to give the multiplicative inverse. What you would have to do is you'd have to flip the fraction, so what was on bottom would become on top, and what would be on top comes on bottom. We call that the reciprocal, and we would have to write this as 3/2. And you can see that this will multiply through and give us 6/6, which will also reduce to 1. Now with the distributive property, it only is going to apply to addition. And what that says is if we have a number that we're multiplying another group of numbers, let's say if we have 3 times 5 plus c over here, what we can do is we can take that 3, and since 5 and c are not like terms, they're not something we can add together, we can't do anything to simplify within the grouping. What we can do is take this 3, however, and we can multiply the 3 times 5, and we can multiply the 3 times c. So we take the 3 times 5, and we get the 15 here, and we take 3 times c, and we get 3c over here. Again, they're not like terms. This one has a c, this one does not, so we have to leave them as they are. But it's a simpler way to write the form of 3 times the quantity 5 plus c. If you were doing it in general, if you have a times the quantity b plus c, you would take a and multiply it by b, and you would get ab, and then you would add it to a times c, so you would get ab plus ac. We don't really have a equivalent version for multiplication, so we're just going to leave that blank for now. That's not a line to fill in, that's just to cross out that section so we know we don't have to worry about anything there. Alright, you will find a short practice section where you have to come up with your own examples of each of these properties below. Go ahead and complete that. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.